DonTheCrown here with a very kind of in-depth guide for Druid leveling. I'm going to try to go through all of the reasons why I think that the Earth Druid is absolutely ridiculous and probably the best choice for leveling a Druid. This build, if we had had access to Ska's Glen in any of the playtests, this build would have really shined bright in the Druid's whole arsenal. We just didn't really have access to this. And so we're gonna go through the entire thing, and I am pretty excited to announce that we're probably going to have all of our build guides up on Mobalytics, so you'll be able to have a nice little cheat sheet. And I believe they're working on some sort of desktop app as well, so you can like see the build in the game, basically like a little overlay, so you can follow along really nice and easy. They've already done stuff like this for Destiny 2, and they're bringing that awesome action over to Diablo 4. So very excited to be working with them. And yeah. Let's talk about Ska's Glen real quick for Druids. Ska's Glen is stupid for Druids. Absolutely stupid. It's ridiculous here because you get a lot of really good generic stuff, like things like Edge Masters is really solid, Expectant is very solid, but you also get like Ghost Walker, which is more movement speed. But for Druids specifically, and specifically Earth Druids, you get Ballistic Aspect, which makes it so that if you have Fortify at all, you get +2 ranks to all of your Earth skills. Crashstone Aspects makes it so that Earth skills do more crit damage to crowd-controlled enemies, so that's slowed, immobilized. We have a whole ton of that in our build. And then Aspect of Quicksand makes Earth skills slow. So you can see how those two work together, and how all three of these work together to make one giant landslide that is going to carry you through World Tier 1 or 2, I guess if you want to do that, through World Tier 3, and right up into that capstone dungeon going into World Tier 4. This build guide is basically going to be designed to carry you all the way through into World Tier 4. We've gone and we've even set up the Paragon boards for you. Note that we're not relying on any glyphs for power. Now, if you do find a good glyph here, you can go ahead and use it. But this is basically where I'd put my points up to like level 65 or so. And that'll make you very, very strong in the late game. Now, we have a whole bunch of aspects here. All of the aspects that you see on the screen are found on the codex. They all increase the power of your build. And there's even like some other good options as well. But these are all just very, very solid. You note that I don't put any on my weapon or on my offhand. That's because you always want to be upgrading your weapon as frequently as you possibly can. Putting a legendary power on it kind of limits your ability to just be like, oh, this new one does more damage. Let me just run over the blacksmith, level it up, and go back to smacking monsters. That's really what you should be doing. You should probably be upgrading your weapon as frequently as you can so you can keep your damage rolling, because your weapon damage is your #1 damage bucket. So for gems, we're going to use the Emerald. This gives us critical strike damage versus vulnerable enemies. We're going to apply vulnerable ourselves. Sapphire is going to give us damage reduction while fortified. And then the Skull is, I think, going to give us really nice, solid, flat armor, which, although I don't think flat armor will scale all that great into endgame, for early game, it is going to be really, really nice. Next up, the skills here, we're going to be using Blood Howl. This is going to apply a heal for us. With Night Howler's aspect, this also gives us critical strike chance, which isn't all that necessary for our build, even though we're high crit, but this also will affect any nearby companions or players for 3 seconds as well, giving them a heal, giving them a crit. So if you're playing with friends, they are absolutely going to love you for having this aspect, and it's in Fractured Peaks, which is really great. Trample will get us around and get us moving, and also just amplify our build altogether. Poison Creeper's probably in every single Druid build right now. It's absolutely strong. Earthen Bulwark is ridiculous as well. Gives us Unstoppable, which works really well with Ghost Walker Aspect. Ghost Walker Aspect makes it so that whenever you're unstoppable, and for 4 seconds afterwards, you gain 10% movement speed if you get off the codex. Mending Stone makes Earthen Bulwark last for 6 seconds. So between the two of these, this is 10 seconds, and it lasts for 13 seconds. It has 3 seconds base, plus an additional 6, so that's 9 seconds of Earthen Bulwark, plus another 4 seconds. That's 13 seconds of Earthen Bulwark, giving you movement speed, and it has a 16-second cooldown. So as long as your shield's not getting popped, you're basically zipping around the map, feeling a lot faster than your friends. And then Landslide and Storm Strike are the generator and spender here. Storm Strike is just absolutely massive. I don't think that there's really anything that is better generator almost in the entire game right now. The Storm Strike, and Landslide is going to do a lot of work. For these spirit boons, we're using wariness here. The way that these work is you'll be able to go to Skosglen. Once you're level 15, you'll start dropping these like spirit boon currencies, and supposedly you're able to buy some of these boons, and you can buy 1 boon per bracket here. And then once you've purchased all of them, you can select 2 of them in 1 zone. So we're doing reduced damage from elites. You could also do thorns, I guess, if this is a high value. You do maximum spirit is also fine. And then we're going to go pick critical strike damage because we'll be critting a ton. Eventually pick up attack speed as well. And then we're going to take fortify for 10% of your maximum life whenever you use a defensive skill. This will give us a lot of fortify, which is very, very solid. We have 2 defensive skills on relatively low cooldowns. This is so much fortify, very good. And the last one makes it so that every 10th kill you cause will cause your next earth skill to overpower. And so overpower scales off of life and fortify value, which means this is very strong because we're going to probably have a lot of life. We're going to have fortify, and very good. It's going to make you do even more damage every now and again. Let's hop directly into the build. I'm going to go by point. I'll have a little spreadsheet or something on this. We'll show this maybe on the Mobalytics site. We'll have the list of all of the points here in order. But we're going to start off very first thing and just take Storm Strike and enhance Storm Strike. This is just great. Storm Strike now has a chance to immobilize all enemies hit for 2.5 seconds. This basically is a melee skill, but it chains to 3 targets and does less damage than it chains, but it's a chance to immobilize those. And you get 25% damage reduction for 3 seconds. That's so good. Absolutely crazy. So good. And then the next thing we're going to take is Landslide, Enhanced Landslide, and Primal Landslide. Landslide, basically you like crush 2 pillars of earth together. You do at baseline 75% damage. It has a spirit cost of 30, a lucky hit of 20%. So the spirit cost is a little bit high, but the lucky hit chance is also kind of low, but the damage is pretty good. It is kind of a small AoE, but you tend to just want to clap elites with it or big packs of enemies, and we're eventually going to have Poison Creeper to help you clear up the trash. The Enhanced Landslide makes it so that after it damages enemies 4 times, the next hit will guarantee immobilize enemies for 3 seconds. This can help you to apply a lot of crowd controlled enemies in just 1 shot. And that's good because Primal Landslide just feasts on every time you immobilize or stun, regardless of if you do it with Landslide or not. So whenever you immobilize or stun, you gain a Terra Mote. And this is just a buff on your bar that you can just stack up. I'm not sure if there's a cap to it, but you can have a lot of Terra Motes. And each enemy hit by Landslide consumes a Terra Mote, which causes a guaranteed critical strike at 40% increased critical strike damage. And bosses always have up to a 10% chance to grant a Terra Mote when hit. Now, this is just absolutely crazy because you can drag tons of Terra Motes into the boss fight, basically, and just clap with permanent crit. It's absolutely insane. Guaranteeing crit is... This is a ridiculous mechanic. And the fact that it also gives you increased critical strike damage is nuts. Absolutely insane. We are going to be abusing ways to immobilize and stun in our build so that you are just locking everything down and blowing it away. Next up, we're going to go and take another point in Landslide. The higher level your main skill is, the more damage that you're going to do. Then we're going to come down to Blood Howl. We talked about Blood Howl already. This is going to heal you, and with the aspect, all of your friends as well. This is basically a 15-second cooldown for a small health potion. Very, very, very strong. Health potions are not like unlimited in this game, and there's definitely some times where you can run out of potions. You'll never run out of Blood Howl, and this is just very strong. Next makes it so that when you kill things, the cooldown is shorter, which is really good. And then you can also make it so it generates spirit for you. So this becomes one of your better spirit generators, better than hitting with Storm Strike, and it heals you at the same time. I definitely prefer this over the attack speed. The attack speed I don't think is very good relative to that. And then we're going to take 1 point in Earthen Bulwark here. This just gives you a nice little deployable shield every 16 seconds. This is something where, like, if you're about to take a big hit from an enemy, you just want to hit Earthen Bulwark and it'll just go right into the shield and you won't probably take any damage because it's for 45% of your base life, which is quite sizable. And then we are going to go back up here and put another point in Landslide. And then we have unlocked Poison Creeper and the game becomes easy mode. The reason for this is because Poison Creeper basically is creeping around, poisoning enemies. It poisons one enemy every 7 seconds for 6 seconds. But when you press the button that has a 20-second cooldown, it will immobilize all enemies around you and poison them for 90% base damage over 2 seconds. 90% is kind of enough to kill weaker enemies, but that immobilize works with this. So now you just generate 1 Terramote for everything that's near you, unless it's a boss or it's unstoppable or something, which is absolutely bonkers. Put the next 2 points into Landslide. You're maxing out here at 105 damage. This is pretty good. And then we're going to put a point in here into Fierce Storm Strike. This makes it so that you have a chance to apply Vulnerable to your enemies when you hit them 50% for 3 seconds. Vulnerable is a debuff. You can notice it on your health bar by like a purple cracked globe kind of effect. And it baseline increases the damage done by 20%. But if you have vulnerable damage on like any of your gear, that number will go up. And yeah, so vulnerable application is very good, and we'll see why as well. Now at this point, we're around like level 16, level 17. We're going to pick up Enhanced Earthen Bulwark because you're probably going to be getting the aspect of Mending Stones in about Act 3, but you're definitely going to want to pick up Ghostwalker aspect in Act 2 in Skazglen, and this is going to make it so that for 3 seconds when you have the Earthen Bulwark up, and for 4 seconds after that, it's basically a movement skill now, which is very good for you. Speaking of movement skills though, we're also going to get Trample as the next point. And so Trample is great because it also makes you unstoppable, so you get that movement speed afterwards. But Trample does insane damage. They buff the crap out of this going into Server Slam. Absolutely insane. 75% baseline damage, and it knocks enemies back. Enemies who are knocked back into terrain, so like a wall, they take an additional 45% damage. So it's 120% damage for 1 skill. And these enemies are also stunned. Hey, look, stunned equals Terramote. So if I see a whole bunch of weak enemies near a wall, I can just trample into them, pop my Poison Creeper, everything's probably dead, and anything that's not dead, just clap with 1 Terramote and it is dead. Now, if you're like, this doesn't seem all that great for bossing or single target, well, don't worry, because Enhanced Trample increases the damage by 150%, but only for the first target. So if you hit too many enemies, this bonus is going to go all the way away. But this is now basically your hardest hitting skill, period. And yeah, this is very, very strong. I'm sure that there'll be some sort of build, probably very late game, where you're spamming Trample nonstop, maybe like a Season 2 build or something where Trample is the primary damage dealer, but not today. Next up, Savage Trample gives you Spirit. So now you can just charge right in Poison Creeper, Storm Strike for vulnerability if you need it, and then enemies are dead. Very, very, very strong combination. And if this isn't enough damage for you, we have Crushing Earth over here, which we're going to take 3 points. Earth skills deal increased damage to slowed, stunned, immobilized, or knocked back enemies. This doesn't stack things that would stack like a slowed, stunned, immobilized enemy. It would say these effects stack. So this is just if any of these are active, you get this. Next, I'm going to recommend 1 point in Safeguard, or you can put this 1 point up here in Preserving Earthen Bulwark, because you're going to start generating some Fortify for that ballistic aspect that we've talked about before. This is going to give you +2 ranks to your 2 earth skills, which is just very strong. And then after that, we are going to go down here and pick up Defiance, which increases our damage to elites, pick up 1 point in Natural Disaster, and then 3 in Resonance. Natural Disaster makes it so that earth skills deal more damage to vulnerable enemies. We're not going to prioritize this because, you know, sometimes enemies won't be vulnerable. If you're playing with like a Bone Necromancer or something like that, then they're always going to be vulnerable, so feel free to go with this right away. But I'm going with Resonance because this allows you to play well and get this damage bonus. So nature magic skills, so Earth and Storm are both nature magic, deal 6% increased damage. You triple this bonus, basically if you cast an Earth skill right after a Storm skill, or a Storm skill right after an Earth skill. And hey look, our generator is a Storm skill. It's called Storm Strike after all. So if you just go Storm Strike, Landslide, it's going to do 18% increased damage, which is very, very strong. Next up here, I'm going to recommend taking Heart of the Wild and Into Abundance. This is just going to help with spirit generation and just allow you to be generating more spirit. You want to be landsliding as much as possible. Having more spirit from your generators is always nice. Then we go all the way back down here again. We're going to take 1 point in Defiance. This makes it so you deal 8% increased damage to elites. Elites are probably going to be the thing that are going to be holding you back. And yes, elites count for elites, champions, bosses, and blood-marked players in PvP. So this is just good for everything. Next up, we're taking the absolutely most correct keystone passive here for any class. And Earthen Might is, I think, ridiculous. I don't even know how to describe this for you guys. I'm just going to say that when I first read this, my brain just exploded. So Earthen Might makes it so it's a lucky hit. Damaging enemies with Earth skills has up to a 5% chance to restore all of your spirit and cause your attacks to be guaranteed critical strikes for 5 seconds. And this chance is increased, so probably an additive bonus here, by 10% if it's a crit, and another 10% if the target is stunned, immobilized, or knocked back. So if you're hitting an immobilized target with a crit, you have a 25% chance to proc this lucky hit. This has a 20% lucky hit, so that's about a 5% chance per hit to just fill up all your resources and be a non-stop critting machine. So you could just landslide, oop, Earthen Might procced, landslide, 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 oop, Earthen Might proc, landslide, landslide, landslide. Absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy. If you have like a lot of lucky hit on gear and get a lot of extra more max spirit, because this restores all of your spirit, not just like 100, like all of it for some reason. It's crazy. You could potentially just spam this. Now you have to keep enemies immobilized or stunned, but yeah. When a boss is staggered, by the way, they do count as being all crowd controlled, so they would be stunned, immobilized, and knocked back. So have fun. It's going to be a lot of damage. After that, just go back and get Defiance. Kind of boring now after looking at Earthen Might, but you know, it is what it is. We take 2 more points in Natural Disaster, just picking up more damage as we go. You're going to get Stone Guard while you have Fortify over your 50% of your maximum life. Your Earth skills deal increased damage. Now, if you don't have enough Fortify, you're not keeping your Fortify up for some reason, you can instead put the points in Safeguard first. This makes it so crit strikes with Earth skills fortify you for your base life. So you can put points in there, because the next thing I'm going to recommend is putting those points in there anyways. So if you don't have good Fortify control, put Safeguard first, and then get Stone Guard. Highly recommend it. Next, we're going to go down here to Neurotoxin, which makes poison enemies slowed. So now they're crowd controlled. So that means any like plus crowd control effects on your items that scales off of this. And your Poison Creeper not only poisons everything around it when you activate, but it applies a 6-second poison every 7 seconds. So things, if you're fighting a boss, it's going to be poisoned for the most part, unless there's ads. And then Envenom makes it so that poison enemies take 30% additional critical strike damage. So you are just going to be absolutely exploding any enemies that you hit with your Vine Creeper. It is very, very nice. Next up, we're going to come up here and grab Nature's Reach. Get 9% increased damage to distant enemies, which is enemies that are not in melee range of you. And then you double this bonus if they're slowed, like poisoned, stunned, like we have a lot of stun, we have at least 1 stun, immobilized, like with Vine Creeper, or knocked back. So we have a lot of options to do this. So that's another 18% increased damage here. Pretty good. Now we're going to enhance our Poison Creeper. We're going to increase the immobilization by 1 second, and then we're going to increase the poisoning from the active for another 3 seconds. So since I didn't really want to take this until we got these points, because this makes that poison last a lot longer for a total of 5 seconds. And so anything that lives for longer than 5 seconds is probably a boss. I'm willing to bet that most elites, if you hit them with Poison Creeper and you just start landslide clapping them, they are dead. They are dead. They are definitely dead. Yeah. Next up, preserving Earthen Bulwark. We'll get some more Fortify into the build. And then we're going to go get Wild Impulses. This makes our core skills cost more spirit, but deal increased damage. Yes, this is a nice 15% increased damage multiplier, but having a drawback to this kind of makes it a little bit less appealing than so many of the other damage mods we have. The Druid really is just stocked full of mods that increase our damage on the tree, and so taking this early doesn't really make much sense to me. And then we are going to go put points into Circle of Life down here. And Circle of Life will be all the way full, which means that we are going to go to get 3% of our life healed every single time that we cast a nature spell that consumes spirit. So every time you landslide, you get a free little heal. I forgot to click Earthen Might. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the skill tree. I think that this is a really quite incredibly solid build. Almost everything on the tree here is just amplifying your damage to almost an obscene ratio. Like if Landslide was twice as big, this build would be shouted down so much because it's just ridiculous. That is definitely its one downside, is that Landslide is relatively small. And so if you're playing with anybody else, look to have things that help group and cluster enemies more, because you'll just clap them down with Landslide non-stop. Talking about gear, so we put like Ballistic Aspect on our helm for the plus Fortify. The Quicksand Aspect allows us to slow enemies. This might not necessarily be necessary once your poisons are slowing enemies, or it might not necessarily be necessary at all. You can replace this with something else. Crash Stone Aspect gives you more critical strike damage against any crowd controlled enemy, which is a lot. Aspect of Mending Stone. This is the thing that makes your Earthen Bulwark better, and it also replenishes some of the Earthen Bulwark barrier. Whenever you kill an enemy with an Earth skill, you'll be killing lots of enemies with Earth skills in this build. On being unstoppable, and for 4 seconds afterwards, you get movement speed. Retaliation makes it so that your core skills, which Landslide is a core skill, deals increased damage based off your Fortify. So the higher your Fortify gets, the more damage you're going to get. It's going to give you 30% more damage in your neck. Aspect of the Umbral makes it so that anytime you apply a crowd control, you're going to get at least 1 resource. If I was going to gamble for anything, I'd probably be gambling rings for this, because if you got 4 primary resource, yeah, this would be very, very powerful. This would mean like every time you hit Poison Creeper in a group, that's like a ton of resources. Trample would be a ton of resources. This is probably your gambling option here. So just buy rings non-stop from the Obel vendor if you happen to get them. And then Night Howler's Aspect. I said this is probably more optional. If you're in a group, you definitely want this. If you're not in a group, you can probably get away with not having this. For Paragon, I am basically ignoring glyphs for this moment because I don't really believe that glyphs are going to be super accessible before World Tier 4. You're probably not going to be leveling them up too much. We want like the most powerful build possible to go into that second capstone dungeon. We don't want to aim for like what our super duper end game build's going to be and leave ourselves weak on the way to get there. We want to be super strong all the way up. And then once we have gotten to the point where we have all the gear and all of the end game glyphs and stuff, we can respec a little bit, which supposedly is going to be relatively easy. I'm using the Earth build here, or the Earth board here, and this just has a lot of good stuff on there. You could maybe use some different boards if you like, but this is just the one that I prefer. This legendary node does give you increased damage to enemies that are affected by crowd control, which is like so many things that we do. We're getting more critical strike damage. We're getting Earth skill damage and critical strike damage some more. We're getting some additional defenses. Defenses are an important thing to get to, and having like all res is very nice. And then we're getting increased damage to crowd controlled enemies and critical strike damage to crowd controlled enemies. This is just a really, really solid. You're obviously going to go through the glyph socket here. If you have some sort of like glyph that kind of works, you can obviously fill it out a little bit, but this is just what I recommend. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Once again, look out for the link to the Mobalytics. I believe that's going to go live on the 30th. And thank you much guys for being here. Come by the stream. We'll be racing to level 100 with our team. We're playing with Gazzy TV and Paul's. Paul's is actually going to be playing our druid, or playing a druid, and she is probably going to play a build maybe similar to this or maybe something else. I don't know exactly sure what she's going to be doing because could get lucky with a couple different things and switch builds. But yeah, definitely come by the stream, come hang out. We have the Twitch drops for once the launch actually happens. I think it starts on the 5th. And there's also a thing where you can like gift 2 subs to any streamer, and that's on a particular list. And I happen to be on that list. My entire team's on the list. So you can go and give Gazzy or Paul's or myself 2 subs. You get a cool mount. Thank you much for being here. We'll check you again soon. And don't forget, you're freaking awesome. Later.